Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Mari, and I'm here with my husband, Jim, and we are going to start talking about artificial intelligence with a guest this evening. I would like to welcome David Blumenfeld. David, would you take just a second and introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks you guys for having me. Appreciate it. So David Blumenfeld, I'm the co-founder of NextRivet. We are a prop tech or property tech consulting firm focused on bringing digital innovation into the physical environment, and obviously a lot of those technology solutions today include AI, which I know we'll talk a lot about. Prior to founding NextRivet about 5 years ago, I was on the founding executive teams at Westfield Labs, which was a digital division of Westfield Malls. Westfield Malls was a international shopping center group, originally based in Sydney, Australia, also with 40, 50 malls here in the US as well as in the UK. So we were an international group. And so I was on this founding team within the physical shopping center company, focused on how do we bring digital solutions into the physical environment to keep shopping relevant, especially back in the 2010, 2012, as Amazon and other digital marketplaces came onto the scene. The shopping centers were concerned about, obviously, about how do we keep people coming to the malls. And so we were really focused on how do we keep the mall and how we keep the shopping experience relevant in the face of this kind of new way of that people were shopping. And so we had a fairly kind of open canvas about in terms of what we were tasked with working on. So everything from front end consumer experiences to how do we leverage technology to help with back end operations, with parking, with building management, et cetera. And we realized, because we're based in San Francisco and based in Silicon Valley, there were a lot of companies that were coming through the Bay Area, a lot of international and domestic shopping center groups and retailer groups who would want to come through the Bay Area kind of on their innovation tech tour. So going to meet with Google and Facebook and Twitter and others. And then they realized we were kind of in their space, but also doing technology. We essentially became a stop on this tour. And so after meeting over the course of 6 or 7 years with probably close to 100 different groups, they would come through, we would present what we were working on. We were fairly open book about what we were up to. And half the time, if not more, these executive teams would turn to each other after we'd presented, and they turn back to us and say, hey, do you think you guys can help us out too? Because there was clearly a lack of experience in this area. And Westfield was really unique in the fact that we had 60 or 70 people in a digital labs group focused on kind of this digital to physical technology bridging, if you will. And most shopping centers, most real estate companies, they may have small innovation groups. It may be one or two people and these people already have a day job. So we were kind of this unique group within the industry. And so they were interested in us helping them. And we had to politely decline, essentially, and say, sorry, we work for Westfield. And we, as you can imagine, we went back to our management team more than once and said, guys, there's a business here, not just a cost center.
Right.
But there was always this kind of competitive concern. So late 2019, my business partner Kyle Spencer and I spun out and started NextRivet, which is really kind of a lot of what we're doing at Westfield Labs, but really for rest of world, and that includes shopping centers and multifamily residential as well as commercial real estate.
Okay, so that was in 2019. What about AI?
Before that, Mari and I kind of grew up with the shopping mall experience. So, I'm happy to hear you guys were working on that problem, because we liked the shopping malls. We thought it was kind of sad as they were getting killed by not only Amazon, but then, things like epidemics came along and made it even worse. But it's interesting you talk about the physical spaces, that you were trying to work with and digitize. We started a project at our school district I call Smart Campus to try to make it more intelligent, and the environment a little more interactive. I know this isn't one of our questions, but I'm still curious.
Here we go. Jim's going off topic.
Still curious. Was your goal to make
an? We only agreed that I'm going to answer a certain number of questions, Jim. I'm big.
I'll try to keep it short. But was your goal to make the space itself more interactive, or just put some kind of? I mean, is this a digital signage question, or is this I want the space to be interactive with me beyond that kind of thing that you guys are working on? Because I'm not clear on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's really it's the answer is yes. It's a combination of all those things. So it was really more about how do we create digital touch points or a digital layer on top within the physical space. So that could be digital advertising, digital screens. Obviously, retail media networks are a big thing these days. That could be how do we enable people to pre-order food from the food court and have it delivered to them, or be able to have it ready when they go pick it up via mobile app. So it's essentially kind of giving them digital interfaces into the physical environment. Um, we did everything. We did kind of frictionless parking, which was basically how do you if you have an account with the mall and you have your license plate and your credit card assigned to you. When you pull into the mall, we could do things around license plate recognition, where we could actually read your license plate, associate that with your credit card and your account, and allow you to kind of go right into the boom gate without ever having to roll down the window and pull a ticket, as an example. So it was like, how do you create these frictionless experiences? How do you create things that tie in, again, from a digital perspective into the physical space? I mentioned the food pre-order and delivery. We had physical fulfillment for for hard good packages. We did indoor navigation. So how do you, instead of just the mall map that you see in a lot of traditional malls, how do you actually take that with you? Whether you go to the screen and then be able to QR code onto an application that could actually help you find your way around the shopping center, and then tie things into that. Right, I'm looking for a specific. If I understand the inventory that all these stores have, how do I don't just want to find a certain store, but now I want to find a certain item and help me find the stores that have those specific items. So there's obviously a lot of ways you can meld all those things together. But I think the broader story was how do you enable these digital touch points to then help you access essentially the physical space more efficiently.
I tell you, I wish I would have liked to have had malls like we were in Austin, Texas back then, and the malls were not like what you described. Mari was famous for losing her car in the parking lot. Inside the mall, she could find anything. I mean, she could tell you where a widget was on a wall anywhere. But outside, when she walked out the door, her car was gone forever. She had to
until they had the key fob that I could press the alarm on
and wait for the alarm to go off.
And then I was good. Okay, so I'm going to do something really.
Sorry, we put in Find My Car functionality. So we
there
literally
said,
Mari,
all right, so two things are going on right now. Sadie, who is our dog that's also a guest on the podcast a lot, is about to start barking because her ball that she plays with is stuck under the chair. And second of all, we haven't talked about artificial intelligence yet.
Sorry,
so
I told you I was getting off track.
Yeah, so Jim, ask a question, or I will ask the question. Okay, so we know that artificial intelligence is reshaping everything, right? I mean, it's like, wow, it's drop in the bucket, big ripple effect. It's going to change everything. So what are you seeing? What are you thinking that AI is going to do for what it is that you're currently doing?
All right, so that's a big question. So I think there's a lot of things, right? I think it's important to back up in terms of AI. I think especially when you talk about AI in real estate, and especially for consumers who are first kind of understanding AI. I think a lot of people initially think AI is like a thing, right? Or maybe they think it's ChatGPT, like just because that's a thing that's been so adopted. But I think the really important thing is, and I think, and no judgment here, I think dating all of ourselves, like if you go back and look at AI, like the very first Amazon recommendations you got because you bought something was an early version of AI, right? And I think AI, it's important to understand that AI is an ingredient and in a way that kind of soups up your technology. It's not a standalone thing. And maybe in the future AI is a bot, but those are all things that are, down the Terminator road and coming. But like the reality is AI is kind of the supercharger in a lot of technologies you already use. And I think, I go back to if you remember the old Intel campaigns that used to see like the Intel inside where, the chip was inside your Dell computer as Austin people, or it was inside your IBM, and there was the ad campaigns that talked about Intel inside, and it was like bing, 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 right? It's really AI inside. It's AI inside everything. So I think it's interesting. People are like, okay, what AI is coming? Like, what's it doing? Like, there's so many things. It's improving on a lot of the things that we already kind of know and use, right? So a practical example, if you look at the way in which real estate companies or malls track foot traffic. So today, historically, a lot of shopping centers have had kind of very basic technology that sits at the door that might be infrared or other kind of basic digital technology that just simply you get a good handle on the number of people who cross the threshold into your shopping mall. Then Wi-Fi came along and then gave you the ability to track phones and some other things to then give you heat maps within certain places. So now you had, okay, I know roughly how many people are coming in. I know the more congested places in the mall, but that was all fairly intuitive because you could obviously tell where do people congregate, where do they not. So now one example of kind of the newer technology in the space is using video analytics powered by AI to actually help understand not just where people are going in the common space, but then how many people from the common area in one a lot of malls call these precincts, in one precinct converted into store, right? And so imagine if you take that to the practical reality of a landlord having a conversation with a retail tenant, and they're discussing what the rent should be, and the retailer's like, I need more people in my store, and the landlord's saying, well, actually, we're driving a lot of people into your store, maybe you're just not converting those people into sales. You now have this kind of version of of what e-commerce retailers are used to. From, I know exactly how many people got to, like, I did some advertising on Google, and then they got to my website, and then they drilled down into a product detail page, and then they converted to sale. They've never had this kind of view of the offline purchase funnel, if you will, right? Now you have this opportunity to see how many people came into the mall, how many people came into this area near my store, how many people converted into store, and if the retailer is willing to share that sales data, actually how many people actually converted into an actual sale and what that revenue was. So there's some really interesting applications that now give you that, again, digital layer on top of the physical to understand from a data perspective what's actually happening in real time and what's actually happening, and not just kind of guesswork that's based on estimations as we have in the past. And so that's one application of that technology. I would say another is you start to get into kind of predictive analytics on something as basic as like maintenance, right? So imagine that you have restrooms sitting next to a food court, and you're like, you've said, determine that, okay, every 3 hours we just go clean the restrooms because that seems to be the right amount. Now, if you understand actually what the foot traffic is going into those restrooms, once they hit a certain threshold, or whatever you set that threshold at, there's an automatic trigger that happens, and that triggers somebody to go and clean the bathrooms. And so you're actually doing that, again, based on real data, not just on estimations, which is a better consumer experience, better maintenance experience. Yeah.
So you were just talking about predictive analysis and things like that.
Analytics, yeah.
Analytics, yes. So one of the things that you always notice, like if I go onto Amazon and I look at a certain product and I don't buy it, then a little bit later, if I go back like that third or fourth time, I notice that the price has changed. It's like if they're trying to sell it, it might have reduced a little bit, but I've also noticed that it's gone up before. So I'm sitting here in my mind and I'm thinking about, okay, if I've got an AI that is literally, doing some video analytics and like kind of watching the number of people that are coming in and out of my store and stuff like that, how difficult is it going to be for the AI to then go, okay, based on the
surge pricing,
Louis Vuitton, based on the handbag the person's wearing or carrying, when is the store owner going to be able to adjust pricing?
Surge pricing. It's like Uber. Uber does surge pricing. Is that the level you guys are thinking about, or are you thinking? Because it sounds like your focus has really been more on the convenience and the atmosphere, kind of like a Disneyfying it. When you go to Disney, they track everything because they want to make your stay happy. Is this a happy place kind of analytics, or is this a surge pricing kind of analytics that you're thinking about?
I mean, look, those are certainly, it depends on who the customer is of that technology, right? So for the shopping center, it's about how do I improve the customer experience and make things more accessible. For the retailer, it may be just what you're saying is, can I start to understand my demographics in a more meaningful way? Could I start to, I mean, the difficulty, right, is that somebody walks in, you see somebody with a Louis Vuitton bag. somebody then comes into your store, do you re-identify them? There's some interesting privacy concerns that come along with that too.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still a ways away from, basically jacking up prices because somebody's wearing a luxury item.
Mm-hmm.
But I think understanding your customer and understanding, okay, I've seen that customer before. I know they are a significant spender. Instead of jacking up the prices, how do I serve them better while they're in the store, to make sure they buy and they're happy? Because I'm less about making them spend more on that specific visit. How do I get them coming back? How do I increase their overall basket size? And how to make them a lifelong loyal customer? I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the bigger picture for retailer as well as a property owner as well.
I think
I
that's
was
the
just
right
curious.
balance. I think it's the right balance. I mean, when you look at people's concerns about, because we talk to people about AI all over the nation, and a lot of it has to do with privacy, with the negative sides. The privacy. We had a person on recently that was talking about, plagiarism detection, being more collaborative versus adversarial from the AI's perspective. So I'm assuming you guys are putting thought into that as to how do we make you comfortable with the fact that we're using all this technology, at the same time make your experience better. So how do you see yourself
Yeah.
balancing those two things?
Well, I think there's a huge education gap right now, right? And if you think
Mm-hmm.
about the industry that we service, which is the real estate industry, um, it's typically a very conservative a group of people, right? They're looking at financial returns based on 5, 10 years out. There's a certain kind of net operating income they look at called NOI. Like there's it's very they are focused on very predictable long-term revenue. Their investors feel the same, right? So now you're talking about technology and ways in which to do things that completely kind of change the game. And we dealt with this, somewhat when we were at Westfield too, and educating a lot of executives who are, who were born in the physical world and grew up in the physical world now had to think about digital technologies, let alone AI, right? So there's a
Mm-hmm.
huge gap. So, and I was to give you the most extreme example, we've had real estate clients where their legal departments are like, we're not using AI at all. Like we're too concerned about, like, the marketing person can't even use ChatGPT to come up with a marketing slogan because they're too concerned that if somebody uploads, sensitive data, which I get the concern, and there are different use cases for this, right? But yes, do not just randomly throw all your financial information into ChatGPT or another cloud-based AI large language model, because then
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where that data is going. But if you are doing certain things, or there are obviously ways in which to leverage this technology for your own organization, where you're not just putting it out in the cloud and on the broader internet. But I think because of the information gap, either people are like either gung ho and all in and not thinking about it, or they're taking a really conservative approach and not taking advantage of some of the efficiencies that they could be gaining because there's too much kind of fear there, at least for now. So I
Fear
think
is a
that's
big thing. Fear is a huge thing that we face it all the time. Anytime we go into a small business, anytime we go into a classroom, a school district, a municipality that we might do training in, fear is huge. And the one thing
yep.
that we made a mistake of at the very beginning was like not taking their fear seriously, because it's really real to them. So one of the things that we found is like small steps, small things that you could show them. Like I have a business owner here locally that, I could go in and take a photo using an AI of like a display that they have set up, and then use the AI to tell me, okay, this is my target demographic. How should I set up this display? How could I change it? What colors should I use in it? And it gives you a ton of information, helping them draw in more customers. So I see AI helping in retail spaces a lot,
Do
and in
you
real
Mm-hmm.
see?
estate, like you said.
Do you see one of the things you would offer some of these people, basically what Mari just described as a service? Like when she creates a website using GoDaddy, they give her a tool to allow her to more easily create the website. Do you see the same thing
Mm-hmm.
with AI tools where you can allow them to have some control of their physical space and the AI be interactive with them to tell them how to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so there's a whole kind of version of AI that exists in the kind of design, build, construction space, right? A physical spaces, whether that's a mall or any place else, right? I think some of us have seen like, hey, I'm gonna go buy a new piece of furniture. I want to see how that furniture looks in a virtual kind of environment within my house. And
Mm-hmm.
those websites are available today. A lot of the furniture retailers, online furniture retailers, have those digital tools to enable you to do that. There is a kind of a more well-known term in the kind of design or construction or architectural space called digital twin. And so
Mm-hmm.
the AI digital tools are enabling kind of essentially a digital twin, a twin of your physical space to understand whether it's everything from merchandising, layout, to then if you think about a larger building, like what's happening from like a building health perspective, right? So if you think about Google Nest, right, for your house, if you use Google Nest or a kind of a digital thermostat, if
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the beginnings of a what's the health of my house. Right now, think about that from a commercial space like a mall or a bigger building. Now you kind of are looking at how do I have kind of what's the health of my building and how do I make my building more efficient, right? So not just individual spaces, but now how do I control the HVAC and air conditioning and heating and all these different environments? Do I lower the lighting if I see things like people aren't going to certain spots of the mall or a specific place? Like how do you essentially get that built? You now have the ability to crunch that data and actually have an intelligent building, and start to actually save real money because your building's thinking for you instead of somebody having to go up and manually turn the dial, so to speak. So there's a massive amount of applications, like from the individual store to the design to the merchandising to then the bigger physical space from a energy efficiency standpoint as well.
Now, do you see the modern? Mari, did you have a question? Because I keep butting in, so I wanted.
No,
If
go
do you have a
ahead.
question?
No,
Do you
no, I'm
see this
good.
modern You see this modern incarnation of artificial intelligence, large language models specifically? Do you see that as something that's valuable in the spaces you work, or is this more of the traditional analytics, like you mentioned at the very beginning, where you have the analytics, machine learning analytics have been around forever, and Google's been using them, Amazon, everybody else, Target uses them to try to sell you things. Are you looking more at that is the real thing, or is there a true value for you for these large language models that have come into being in the last 2 or 3 years?
Oh, I mean, I think the LLM, large language model stuff has, and I only used Amazon as an example of like the early AI was simply smarter
Hmm.
recommendations, right? Now
Sure.
you're getting to a place where you can input different, like ways in which you search for information is different from, everybody's obviously used to how we use Google. Now the
Hmm.
way in which you prompt a large language model is so different in a lot of ways and so much more interesting in the
Hmm.
way that you get and extract information. And so I would say I use an chat GPT or another AI model on a daily basis, whether that's something as simple as gosh, I wrote this email and I'm having an off day, like say just put it in there, write this email, put it in there, and literally all I say is say this better. And more often than not, it says it better. And I may then tweak it back and then send it off. Sometimes you're thinking like, okay, what I need to like organize my thoughts. I'm looking at doing a partnership for this, and this. What are the things I should be thinking about? And it'll spit these things out. Or even like I'm not a lawyer, but I've been in business development for 20 plus years. Like I've done hundreds, if not thousands of contracts. Instead of going to a lawyer, I know I need this one clause. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to write it well. Like write me a clause on X, Y, and Z, and I know enough to then be able to tweak it, to make sure that it's actually accurately representing what I'm trying to get across from a legal perspective. But the implications are like in terms of efficiencies, in terms of our ability to get more things done, and also get more things done without outside help, is pretty massive. And
It's
I,
time too. It's for me, it's time. It's like,
yeah,
if you did get an attorney to do that clause when it was just one clause that needed to be added into an existing contract, how
yeah,
long would it take for you
and
to
money,
have that
right?
happen and money? But,
Yeah.
time is money, really.
This is just my AI bot right now talking to you guys. Like I'm not even on this call.
Yeah.
So,
You
that's
laugh,
that's
but
it's not
I have been
it.
on webinars. Yeah. I've been on
yeah,
webinars or whatever before to where you're like, is that really somebody sitting there? Or better yet, when you're on Zoom calls and the only thing that they're wanting to join is their AI note taker, and they're not actually joining the call. Do you remember the old movie? You said we dated ourselves. There was a really old movie called Real Genius back in the day.
Yeah.
Where the guy walks into the class and the class is full, and then a couple of weeks later he walks in and there's a lot of tape recorders in there, and then finally when he walks in, he's the only one that showed up to class. Even the professor has a tape recorder that's like talking for him. I see that in Zoom meetings all the time. So
yeah.
Well, so we are starting to run short on time, Jim. So you need to ask one more question because we are starting to run short on time.
All right, I got another question then. We talked about the large language models, and the way you're talking about use it, I use it every single day too. So I completely agree with you, especially filtering my emails because sometimes I do have a bit of an attitude if I'm having a bad day. But do you also see these large language models translating into the physical space? I see you nodding your head over there, by the way.
Maury's cracking up like, yeah, you have bad days, 100%.
View, but when you start talking about them translating into the physical space, I see the large language models as a much better way of interacting with technology than we've had in the past, because the paradigm that we have in the past, whether it's a phone in front of your face or me sitting there staring at a computer, is not ideal from a human perspective. So do you see these also being translated into the physical space, like walking up to a kiosk that's got a interactive avatar that you talk to discuss what you want to buy that day? Is that something you see people working on for the mall kind of idea, or is there something else going on that I'm missing?
Yeah, I'll give you a real life example. So we had a client, a large real estate client, large shopping center client. A lot of every website you go to today kind of has chatbot, a version of chatbot, right? Where it's like if you need some customer support, and I call that kind of chatbot 1.0. Like it's a bot. You ask some questions. Maybe there's a live person that jumps on. Pretty kind of scripted, right? You need to ask the question in the right way in order for you to get the right response. With the large language models and LLM, you kind of get this. Most of these chatbot companies have either develop their own AI or tying into the APIs, kind of the hooks, if you will, of the open AIs or the other chatbot platforms, or other AI platforms, to be able to give to you then a large language model experience. So if I type some free form text in the past, unless I write the question exactly the right way, I may not get an answer at all. Now I can write a question and I get a good response. To the point where we have clients who have had customer service people who generally take over that conversation after a certain point. They may not need that many people on staff anymore because the large language models are actually answering the question. I will say this though, with the biggest caveat, and this is one of the big downfalls. People expect to put AI on something. This is where even more you talk about the AI. Like there is no the AI. The AI layer is only as smart as the data that you have behind it. So if companies don't provide clean, structured information, and maybe it doesn't have to be as structured anymore because that's one of the benefits of AI. But unless you give the AI technology access to your data, to good data, it's garbage in, garbage out. And what I mean by that is like you're not like somebody's like, I launched this new AI chatbot, but I actually didn't give it access to any more data than I had in the past. It's still going to feel like a 1.0. Like until you actually give it access to the data and allow it to do its thing, you're going to have a limited experience. And so I think we go back. I know we talked a lot about education. I think that's another piece is like you still have to do the heavy lifting behind the scenes to get your data accurate and correct in order to make these experiences richer for people, because it's not just going to magically happen unless you do that.
That is very true. The magic does not happen that way because, I mean, when Jim and I first started doing this, he was like creating a chat bot before large language models came on the scene for like onboarding for new employees, which was awesome. And then when the large language models came on the scene, he was like, oh, well, I'm just going to dump everything into like a Google Drive. And then he wrote all this stuff with this programmer guy, and then he programmed a bunch of stuff. And he's like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, oh, well, what about our Llano Elementary School schedule? Well, that schedule is in tables with colors and different fonts. And, it's all really pretty because it's what we put on bulletin boards for you to look at and see. Well, a large language model it did not ingest that data. I mean, it was like,
we spent a lot of time on
no.
data prepping and data ingestion for that first HR onboarding tool that we created for our school district, and it's been an ongoing process. I mean, the tools we provide to the school, we literally provide them in a way that allows us to tune things as we find either better data or better interaction paradigms that the teachers like. So we're always exploring different interaction paradigms to see what works and what doesn't. It's definitely not a set thing. We have a hybrid model where we use some onboard stuff that's completely local that we can use for filtering for privacy and stuff like that. But it's not great it's never going to compare to the stuff in the cloud. So we have the ability to select which tool we want to use in the cloud, depending on the circumstances. So I certainly see what you're talking about when it comes to, we tell people all the time, there is no AI, there is different tools that allow you to utilize large language models, but that it's sort of like everybody used to call a photocopy or a Xerox machine. They got this term AI stuck in their head, and everything generically gets slapped. We have security camera companies that come in with their new AI security cameras, when in reality it's the same thing they sold us last year, but last year was called analytics. And so we could, they could use that for telling the difference between a license plate and a car and a person. So the technology didn't really fundamentally. That's why I asked you earlier about analytics, traditional analytics methodologies versus large language models, because some of it is literally just they're sticking it, slapping a new sticker on it, and calling it a new technology. When in reality, they haven't made many changes yet.
Yeah. And that's where I go back to my Intel Inside analogy, right? It's like it's Intel Inside, it's AI inside. It's not a thing. It's an ingredient brand.
Right.
Agree.
Well, guys, we are out of time, so I'm going to have to call it, Jim. No more questions.
Well, he might have one more thing he wants to say, though. He didn't get a chance to ask. Do you have any questions or anything else you'd like to add before we?
Oh no, this has been great, you guys. I think I mean it's always fun to talk about this stuff because it is so ever evolving. I've got a son in college who's doing quantum computing. So
That's
talk
cool.
about AI, people not understanding AI. Welcome to quantum computing. That's a whole different topic.
That's a whole big topic. It is. I could have a long conversation about that.
People say heads or tails, and when you can say yes, then that's a whole evolution of technology right there.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, David, before we sign off, would you go ahead and tell us, like, if somebody wanted to find you, like follow you on LinkedIn or anything like that, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you. So our company name again is NextRivet, NextRivet. That's just nextrivet.com. I can be reached at david@nextrivet.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of David Blumenfelds out there with NextRivet. I think you can hopefully you can figure it out. But really appreciate the time. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
It was a fun conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a really great evening.
All right, you too. Thanks, guys.
Bye.